Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of English with Kirsty. Today we're going to do something different. It's a first for this podcast. I have interviewed somebody. So the rest of this podcast is going to be the interview that took place this morning with Jane Eggers from Jane Eggers Translations. And we're going to talk about some of the differences between English and German, some of the things that you need to think about if you're a German native speaker who's writing English texts. And there are also some comments there about where you can find Jane. She's got a website, she's got a blog, and she has a Facebook page. So I'll include all of those in the show notes, which will be at www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 16. And they're also at the end of the episode here. So I hope you enjoy the interview. And go and check out Jane's stuff as well. She's got some really good information on her Facebook page and on her website. Okay, and here's the interview. Okay, well, hi, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being part of this podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, well, as you know, I'm a British translator. I've been living in Germany for the last 20 years now. Oh, it seems like a long time when you put it like that suddenly. My background is in IT translation. I worked at a large software company for 15 years and then decided to go freelance at the beginning of this year. So now I'm working for myself and having lots of fun doing that. I'm still doing a lot of IT translation, but I've also started to do some all-round English support, English language support for small businesses and solopreneurs. So I'm doing some translation for them, websites and that sort of thing. Language editing, sometimes language consultation, and even coaching sessions if people need to prepare for a business appointment and they want to run through some scenarios or dialogues before that. So I'm moving into that area now, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds interesting. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
The two aspects. I love being a freelancer now because of the freedom that it gives me. But what I really love about translation in itself is the puzzle of it. Taking a German text and really digging right down into it to find the essence of that text, and then finding a way to communicate the essence into English so that the English readers really get a sense of the person and the passion behind the words. I really get a buzz out of doing that.
Yeah, that's something I say to my customers, that translating is not just about looking for the words and finding the same words in the other language. You really have to make it flow and sound good.
Right, yeah.
Some of the common mistakes that you find if you look at a text that's been written by a German native speaker, what are some of the common errors that you see and have to fix if you're doing proofreading?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the first things that springs to mind is the articles, the and a, and all those. Sometimes there are too many the's in the English text because you would have them in the German and they're not needed in the English context. And sometimes it's the other way around, that there should be a the and there isn't one. It's quite a hard thing to get to grips with. So I do see a lot of those errors. Another thing is the use of tenses, especially when it's a tense that is used in a different way in German. I'm thinking about, for example, the difference between the present perfect and the simple past. I wrote a text, or I have written a text. Sometimes I need to polish those off a bit, put them round the right way again. That's quite difficult. And another obvious one is the capital letters, the uppercase, because obviously the nouns in German are always written with an uppercase, with a capital letter at the beginning, and that's not necessary in English. So I do end up having to put a lot of those into lowercase again. Those are 3 examples off the top of my head, yeah.
Yeah, they're good examples. And do you think that people sometimes try to use phrases because they've learned them and they think, oh, that's a good English phrase, but it's sometimes a phrase that people don't use anymore? Or do you think that it sounds better when people try to use more complex phrases that they've picked up in a book or something like that?
Oh, that's tricky. It's obviously nice to use a phrase that you found in a book, but you really have to know it's going to work in the context.
Yeah.
It's something that you gain a feel for it over the years, I think. And yeah, it's a dual-edged sword. I think people can pick up a good feel for it by reading a lot, maybe reading blogs and magazines and all that to see how phrases are really used in context instead of just
Yeah.
plucking them out of thin air and then plonking them into a text.
And
So
also seeing when they're used, they may have been used 30 years ago or something, but if they're not used anymore, then it doesn't make it sound authentic. It just makes it sound a bit old. So I guess
right, yeah, there are things like that. That's true. Things can sound a bit archaic, especially in the online context when everything's a bit more modern and it changes very quickly as well. So I have to stay on the ball to make sure I know about the current usage. That's also an issue for me too.
Yeah, languages are changing. It's growing and developing all the time. That's what makes it interesting, but it also
Yeah,
brings up some things you have to think about.
that's
If I'm
right.
talking to my colleagues about when they're writing things, sometimes they have to have a translation because everybody needs the same text. But I usually say, don't write something in German first and then translate it into English. It's better if you can write in English straight away, because then you don't have the whole issue about translating phrases that don't translate. But
Yes.
in terms of the way both languages, you write in both languages, would you say there are some differences in terms of the structure?
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely. And that's part of the art of translation, to not just follow the structure of the source language, but to really think about how it should be, or what the typical style would be in the target language. Let me think of an example. You shouldn't generalize, but to give a couple of general examples, German tends to use a lot of nouns and noun phrases, whereas English, on the whole, uses quite a few verbs and verbal constructions. So it's quite good to think about that. Another thing is active and passive. You find a lot of passive constructions in the German, whereas you might in English want to have an active construction. That's kind of the same, where the verbs are more active than the nouns, and then the same with the active and passive thing. For example, the information is displayed to users. You might be better off turning it around and saying users see the information. So it's good to bear that in mind when you're taking the German text and thinking, can I put this in a more active way?
And it involves the reader more as well, doesn't it? It makes them feel that they're part of what's going on. I guess that's one of the reasons
Yes,
that we do
yes,
that. But
exactly. I think that's a good thing in general as well, to have it user orientated. That's my technical documentation background coming out there as well. And another one that I thought of is that German texts German sentences tend to be quite long. And
yeah,
it could often be that I'll take a German sentence and maybe chop it up into two shorter ones when I put the sentence into English, just because it's more the style. I mean, sometimes German sentences are just too long anyway, or sometimes English sentences are too long and can benefit from a bit of editing. But that's quite a thing that comes up quite a lot.
yeah, I find that too. Sometimes I think people want to show fluency and make it, oh look, this is a really long sentence. It shows that I'm familiar with the language and how to put it together, but sometimes it's just incredibly difficult to read. So you're not actually helping yourself, because if your reader has to read it 2 or 3 times to get the idea, then they're going to get annoyed with you, and if they can, not read the rest of it, because it's a pain for them. So
Right, yeah.
the idea is to make it clear and easy for your reader to understand so that you get your message across. And I think, yeah, that's something, perhaps because sometimes in German the use of commas is more consistent, so it breaks the sentences up more than we do in English. But even then, the sentence doesn't need to be really long. You don't need to have lots of subclauses. It's better to organize your thoughts to start with and then put them into shorter sentences that make sense.
Absolutely, I agree, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for this advice. Where can people find you online if they want to? I know you've got a blog that people might be interested in reading the articles, or your website. Where can they find you?
Yes, my website is at www.jane Jane-Eggers, or dash, I suppose, Jane-Eggers-translations.de, which I'm realising now is a bit of a mouthful. But
It's okay. I'll put the link on the show notes as well.
Fabulous. And there's also my Facebook page, which is quite busy, lots going on there. And that's, if you look for Jane Eggers Translations on Facebook, you'll find my business page.
And your What to Say Wednesdays with
What to Say Wednesdays, yeah.
Every Wednesday. Good.
That's right. That's I have different phrases for particular situations. So today's Wednesday. I've just put one up there for things that you can say when you're really sure about something and absolutely convinced. So I've got 8 different ways of saying that. So you can just vary what you say a little bit. And so I do that every week, and each week focuses on a different situation.
Okay, well, it'd be good if our listeners check that out, and I'll include the link to that as well on the show notes.
Lovely, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.